and welcome to On the Marie Curie Couch, the podcast that aims to break down taboos and start open, honest conversations about death and dying. I'm Jason Davidson. I'm a social worker by profession, and I've worked in palliative care, hospice care, and bereavement support services for more than a decade. Each episode, we'll be speaking to a well-known guest to find out how they feel about their own mortality and how their personal experience of bereavement has shaped the way they live their life. Today, I'm on the Marie Curie couch with Tom Digby. Tom's a British rower who competes with the GB rowing team. Since joining the team in 2021, he's won gold in the men's 8 at 2 World Championships, at 3 European Championships, before claiming gold with his teammates at the Paris 2024 Olympic Games. Tom is a graduate of Yale University, where, alongside winning national rowing championships each year, he majored in astrophysics. Tom Digby, welcome to On the Marie Curie Couch.
Pleasure to be here. Thank you for having me, Jason.
You're welcome. How are you today?
I'm good. Busy in the middle of a working day, trying to figure out life after writing, so juggling a few different options. But pleasure to be here.
Okay, so the rowing's not happening for a bit.
Not for a bit, no. Well, actually, given the situation with my mum, I lost love for the sport in many ways, and it took a lot to get across the finish line in Paris, given the circumstances. So I decided to step away. I've moved in with my fiance, well, now fiance, for the first time. We've been dating for 8 years or so, and we're in the same place until I could really move because of rowing. So it's been some big life steps in that regard since the games as well. So that's exciting.
Huge life steps. That's really exciting, and congratulations on the moving in together. That's really nice. And so you've just mentioned your mum there. One of the questions I start with on this podcast is if you've had a significant bereavement that you can talk about. And I know, because we were just discussing this before we started, that your mum died in December 2023. If it's okay with you, Tom, can you tell me a bit about that, a bit about how your mum died?
She died relatively peacefully. I was there for it, which is something no one really prepares you for. I had to come home off a training camp, actually, in Sierra Nevada. This horrible, grueling training camp, and already coming back off of the back of that, exhausted, and getting the call. Where it was, yeah. I still really don't know how I did it, if I'm completely honest. But she was in a sea rider facility in Reading when she passed. So I got back there. I remember getting back about 2 a.m. because I went got an emergency flight booked. I knew the call might be coming, but it was really hard to say when. She wanted me to be getting on with my life because the process of this happening was a terminal diagnosis was 3 years. So initially you put everything on hold, and then you sort of think, this is the new normal. You get back to life a little bit, and then occasionally everything goes on hold again. And we just did that so many times that I kind of had to be getting on with things. Otherwise, I think I'd be in a very different situation. So we made those choices, but I was glad that, things could move quickly when I knew the end was coming, and I could be there for it. But yeah, I went to see her just before going on the training camp. That was the last time I spoke to her. So maybe a little bit of me is sad that when I knew it was coming, that I didn't get the chance to say goodbye in that way. But we'd had that conversation a million times over. And I think no matter what, you're going to want one more conversation. So as things go, I think it went quite smoothly, but no one prepares you for how difficult it actually is.
Thank you for sharing that. And I think, for people listening, there, without a doubt, there's such kind of conflicting decisions to be made over that time, isn't there? So as you're describing, your mum had a long period of time when she wasn't well. And, and as you've said, that can be kind of up and down. And so she's living with a terminal illness for a long time, and no one knows when the end's going to be. No one knows when someone's going to die. And as your mum, you said your mum wanted for you, and actually, but what everyone has to do is get on with life, which is also happening at the same time, isn't it?
It's a really difficult balance, really difficult.
It's such a difficult balance, yeah. And I think that thing about, you were just describing where the rational head is, well, life continues. I'm making these decisions. I'm going to the training camp. And then, of course, in hindsight afterwards, it's like, oh, well, what if there'd been an opportunity for one more conversation? But actually, you can only make the decisions you make at the time. And it's just part of that kind of challenge and conflicting time. It's really difficult.
It is. I think people can live in that limbo for really, really long periods of time. My dad was the sort of primary caregiver. My grandma, mum's mum, is still around, and this miraculous late 80s lady who plays 18 holes of golf a day and goes to the gym every day and goes for a sauna and then goes out for drinks with her friends and is full of life. So I mean, there was it was we had that support network, and those people were like grandma and dad. My mum's sister Sue, they were very instrumental in supporting mum, which took the weight off me, so I didn't have to live in that limbo, and so I'm very grateful to them in some ways. And I tried to spend obviously as much time with mum as I could, and I was in some ways very lucky because my profession, actually, the National Centre is 10 minutes away from where my mum lived. So I don't think there was any other profession that I could be pursuing at the top level that would have led me to be right on the doorstep of mum through this period. So in some ways, that was a lucky coincidence because it means I didn't have to drop everything, and that's what she wanted. But like you say, living in that limbo is incredibly difficult, and it feels really hard to take advantage of things and move forward with your own life with that hanging over you because it's very haunting.
One of the aims of the podcast is to encourage conversations about death and dying, because we know that death can be a very taboo topic and people might not feel able to have conversations. And sometimes that can add to people's pain and experience by holding things in or feeling they have to keep things in. And I just wondered if you could talk a bit about your experience of that. So maybe winding back those 3 years back to either 2019 or 2020 when your mum was first diagnosed, and whether there was any conversations about death and dying.
There were. I actually remember the moment quite vividly. It's funny. I think it was lockdown actually at the time, February lockdown. Yeah, just best part of 3 years, wasn't it? February of 2021, and had a conversation in the car park because I couldn't go near mum when she told me. And I had quite a severe back injury at the time. That felt like rock bottom to me because in some ways I lost out because of COVID on my final year at university and like moving forward and captaining the team, and I had a lot of resentment towards missing out on an ending on that part of my life. But actually, in hindsight, it gave me a lot down with my mum and a lot of time spent together as a family we wouldn't otherwise had. So that's how I kind of contextualize even the year before the diagnosis as a positive thing. But that conversation to start with, initially I knew in the moment, like when she told me, you can just tell. So it really hung on me like a weight. I think more so than even my brother or maybe my dad, they had hope. And actually my fiance's father was diagnosed with a terminal illness, died before my mum, in April of 22, but he was diagnosed just months after my mum. So we were going through this in parallel. So that process as well made me I was much closer to it than the rest of my family were to Mark, and made me realize that it was coming and stop sort of grasping at hope. And I don't mean that in a very negative way. I think I've seen it with so many conversations as everyone talks about novel treatments and all those kind of things. And I think it's a natural human instinct, but I didn't necessarily have that same hope, which in some ways was more difficult, definitely, but in other ways it made me grasp the reality of the situation and do everything that I would do as if I wouldn't regret it, which was really powerful. But to more specifically answer your question, I found it very isolating. I found it very difficult. First thing I'd say is there's loads of resources out there to get support. Go and find it because actually the people around you, even your best friends, might not be able to deal with the reality that you're dealing with. It's incredibly scary. It really bursts someone's sense of reality. If you're talking constantly about it's weighing constantly on you and constantly about your mum and how she's going to pass. I mean, I even use the word pass, don't we? We're so afraid of the word death. Um, and so the whole process, so especially around young 20-year-olds at the time, I was 22, I guess, 23 when that diagnosis happened. And so all my friends had parents, and suddenly all my friends have 4 grandparents even and stuff, and or a great grandparent, and I'm suddenly there with my dad and my grandma left. And so that sort of people aren't willing to confront that a lot of the time, and I used to hold that against them a little bit. I was like, why can't you see what I'm going through? But I feel like no one really wants to deal with that, and it's such a difficult thing that it can be incredibly isolating. So you find those support networks, find the spaces that you can have those conversations. People are always care. They always have a lot of love, but they just don't know quite how to convey it, especially with the people who were my own age. They didn't really know the reality of the situation. And the only advice I could offer on that front is just to hold space. I found the best way, the best technique for other people is actually the how you doing type questions never really have the right answer. But if you sort of ask around it, if you're like, oh, is your brother coming back to live closer in my case? Or like, how's your dad getting on? Just asking around the issue, just giving people space to fill in the details and not giving sort of too much pity or too much emotion. And asking around the practicalities gives them space to feel seen and show their emotion without going in with really sort of hard demanding questions that often people don't actually know the answers to, but it makes them feel seen and heard. So holding space and not trying to fix the problem for someone, and asking those questions around it are the 2 techniques I'd say for anyone who sort of hasn't been through something like this and has a friend or like extended family member, whatever it is, that's going through something similar. I think they work really well.
Do you know, I think that's such great advice. The asking some of the practical questions or some of the questions around what's happening. Because often what happens is, of course, people will say, and you might have experienced this yourself before your mum was ill and then before your mum died. But actually, people will say, oh, well, I didn't know what to say to him. I don't know what to say to him. I don't know how to make him feel better. I don't know what to do. And, you know, people who are grieving or people who are, you know, have a loved one who's living with a terminal illness. I often hear people saying in my work, you know, even the neighbours cross the road, like, I'm feeling so isolated and people seem to be avoiding me, and which adds to the isolation. And of course, for those people, they're feeling scared because they don't want to get it wrong and they don't know what to say. And I think that advice you're giving about actually focus on something that's quite practical. You might think it's odd to ask somebody about, you know, something that's a bit more practical, but actually, as you're describing, it's a great opener. And also it makes you feel seen and heard.
It gives you that space as well, especially if you're not sort of bombarding someone with questions. If you ask about how their brother's getting on, and then whatever it is, then suddenly at the end of that, they'll probably add on how they're feeling, but it's less sort of intrusive and direct. And yeah, just giving a space at the end of like when they finish saying something, if you just give it a second, there's probably something else to come out. There's so many thoughts rambling through, at least my head, throughout this whole process, and just having someone who's willing to listen to them is the biggest thing. And I mean, like you say, like you said, trying to make someone feel better. The honest answer is you can't. It's like, for someone's used that example of like if you found like an injured animal somewhere, you know what I mean? Your body language would calm. You'd make the approach like relaxed. You try and like just give it comfort and support. You know, food, like whatever it is in that like physical way of making someone feel safe and relaxed. And there's nothing you can say. I honestly think if you're trying to make someone feel better, it almost has the inverse effect. Just holding space and showing love, and just the acceptance that this is going to be, it's a real journey. It was 3 years or best part of till mum passed, and I'm only 14 months on now, and I can still barely have these conversations without crying, which I'm proud to do. To I will add, but yeah, it's a journey. So if you think it's gonna, you know, anything you can do in a single day is going to fix it, is a complete naivety. It's these are massive life changing moments that flips someone's entire perspective, and it's different for different people. But for me, in my case, my mum was the matriarch of the family, was the center. So it's a massive rebalancing in her absence.
I think you touched on something else as well about assumptions around support networks. So people might think, oh, well, he's got lots of friends or colleagues or a brother and a father and other people around. But actually, you can still have all of that as you're describing and just still feel incredibly isolated. And one thing we talk lots about on this podcast is how everybody's experience of grief is unique to them and unique to the relationship they have with the person who is dying or who's died. And so, two brothers or three brothers or two sisters and a husband and an uncle and an auntie are all going to have unique relationships with the person. So, therefore, their experience of grief is going to be unique and not the same.
Yeah, that's definitely the case. Yeah, I can only really speak. I can speak to my fiance's family, but I feel like it's a bit too personal, and I wouldn't share that. So I'll speak from my experience on that. But it has profound implications on how it affects a family unit. Like I say, my mum was the central figure within the family, and so I'm the eldest child, and also I don't know. I mean, by nature of being a Olympic gold medalist and or world champion, then whatever it was, I sort of had a presence within the family as the eldest son, and it felt like as well. My dad always played second fiddle to my mum, and he won't be annoyed at me for saying that. My mum wore the trousers, whatever the phrase is. She was the boss, and so it kind of felt like in some ways I had to step up and fill those shoes at least. So there's a whole different dynamic in terms of the family and the rebalancing and how you manage that um, as well, and the absence that leaves you with. Because if it were like, if the roles were inversed, it would be a very different experience. Watching mum lose dad and all of that, I can really, after being a long way on in this journey, I can see how different in many ways that would have been, and how how I would always feel safe with her there. There's just she'd always just take control of everything, so I never would have had to step up in other ways. So it really is different, and you miss different absences that person leaves by the lack of their presence, and I think I've watched the relationship. I mean, losing a daughter as well, my grandma. Is yeah, I think I don't think it's all comparative, but some say that can be the most difficult because I think most parents would, in a heartbeat, trade places. Uh, yeah, I can see that was all my grandma wanted. So her experience of it was incredibly different. Like I say, just giving people space to talk about theirs because you're not going to make it better for them. And almost by doing that, you do when you're not trying to fix.
Yeah, I think something else you're describing as well is that kind of, I mean, I was going to say ripple effects, but actually it's more than it's often at times more than a ripple, probably like a tidal wave. I mean, it's everything changes. Everything changes. And as you're describing the kind of roles within the family, the roles people played, the role the individual who's died played, and therefore then them not being there anymore, who's going to take on those roles? But also, everything shifts. I mean, the kind of ground shifted beneath the whole family unit, hasn't it? And so it's kind of navigating all of that at the same time as grieving. And I think that's a really important message, Tom, as well, for people listening, because so much is happening. Them ripple effects are stretching far and wide, and they're impacting so much of what's going on. It's not as straightforward as grief and bereavement and sadness.
It really isn't. It really isn't. And you have that. I mean, as people go on these journeys, I think they'll have those stark moments of realization where the words you've just uttered will really hit home. Because I've had a few of them, and suddenly, in the last few months, as we rebalance as a family, and you realize that like we're kind of just about getting to a point where we're looking forward and moving forward as a family unit, and then a lot of things are dug up. A phrase that was used recently was it's either a rebalancing or a revealing, and the sort of different members of the family. Hopefully, we rebalance, and some may be revealed to an extent where like they don't rebalance, which is actually this can happen. The mum was a glue in many ways. So it can be very challenging, and families can have periods where they readjust and move apart, and then come back together again. And there's a lot of things in flux and everyone's dealing with it at different rates, especially with someone like mum, who was such a central part of all of it in our entire extended family. So it's not a quick process, and there's a lot more than you'd first think as well.
I think the rebalancing and the revealing is really true of my personal experience. You know, my parents died in 2017 and 2018, 10 months apart, and
Sorry to hear
so
that.
from personal experience, but also from professional experience as well, of having had these types of conversations with hundreds of people in my sort of job, then yeah, and I think it's that the revealing bit about seeing and hearing things that you might never have known, and or just things being unearthed. And of course, if the roles are shifting and the roles are changing and the responsibilities are changing, then new things are inevitably going to come to light. And I think that goes back to your point you were saying earlier about, well, how do we remember at those moments to bring back in the kindness and the love and remind ourselves of the wounded animal, and taking a deep breath and slowing ourselves down and approaching in a more gentle way. It's tough to remember those bits at those times, isn't it? But I think it's important to try to.
It really is. Yeah, I think people can act out in very different ways around this, the big moments. So I think just having a forgiveness as well, and seeing that you could take it two ways. You can be angry at, different members of the family. Other family members can be angry at me for the fact that I wasn't there, for example, because I agreed with mum to train, or that's an example I've made peace with, and all of that. But someone could hold resentment at me for that. You can look at it two ways. You can take that and be angry at different members for not handling the situation as you want them to, or you can just see where it comes from a place of love and pain, and everyone's just doing the best they can. I truly admire people who witness this on a day-to-day basis, because it completely and utterly ground me down in a big way. So yeah, you have to remember that it comes from a place of any of those irrational, stupid decisions where someone's acting out, it's going to happen. But forgive them. It comes from a place of love of the person, especially in the family, and sort of seek to understand where it's coming from, rather than just get angry back and escalate the situation, because there's enough going on that you need to focus on.
And I think, as you've just touched on as well, like do the same for yourself. So there's something about, and this is easier said than done, but there's something about forgiving yourself and being kind and gentle with yourself. But I know that's not always easy.
Yeah. Yeah. That's made me think about something very unrelated that I think actually was hugely powerful for me in leaving me with a sense of, what's the word? Making it as easy as possible. So my love language is physical touch, and I'm sure you could find other ways of research for other people who sort of have different primary ways of loving methods to sort of deal with this. But the counsellor I was working with at the time, he recommended that my mum get something physical for me. Well, actually, I for her. So I got her a nice blanket that I wrote a letter, and sorry, 1 second. I wrote her a letter, and I said, it's for all the times that I can't be there. She wanted me to get on with my life, so I did. And I was there a lot. I was there multiple times a week. So I say it as if there were just these periods with training camps and stuff. But apart from that, obviously I was 10 minutes down the road. But for all the times that I couldn't be there, and even on a week where I was seeing her yesterday and was seeing her in 2 days, something because she knew she was going. You just want a moment. So I got her this blanket that was on her bed, and actually, when she went into hospital in 2023 February, when she had a panoramic chemo that almost killed her, it was very touch and go. I put it at the foot of her bed, annoyingly, and it stayed with her every night until she passed. At which point I took it out with me, and she got a little label attached that says, "Whenever you were in need of a hug," or something along those lines. I think I could probably remember it if I really tried, but for me, it created a very visceral connection to her that gives me a space to process my grief. So I could always, it's a very hard thing to do with other people around. A lot of the time, especially for some people, I'm probably better at it than others, and having my heart on my sleeve and talking about it in this way. But having a connection in whatever way, whether it's a photo of a moment of time that creating that time that means the world to you, whether it's, a gift, a physical thing, a place. I have that blanket, and she wanted her ashes scattered at a tree, which we walked straight to after she passed. So it really felt like a transference in whatever way. I wouldn't call myself religious, although I was raised it, but I'm very spiritual. And so having the tree and going there straight away afterwards, and then going to visit her and talking to the tree as if it were her, and that blanket, I think have actually really helped connecting with the grief, because I think a lot of people can avoid these feelings in a massive way. It's so difficult, and you don't see that in anyone, really. I think to see it, you have to be so close to someone. It's always beneath the surface, and it's generally dealt with in moments that are alone, moments when people are alone. So I couldn't recommend finding a method like that, where you agree with the person, like a place where they think they want to rest. And so it's kind of, I think that's where she is, rationally, whatever. I think in terms of how it lets you move on with life and process it, it's a really powerful thing. And then also whatever the love language, and finding a way like that to have a way after the person has passed to connect with them. I think because you still have a relationship with that person, even though they're gone. Like, it's my mum. So like what she'd think or what she'd say are always going to be present. So finding a way to have a relationship with that person in that way, it's not often, but it's really powerful in the way it lets you move on with life, and have a feeling of contentment and love, rather than fear and avoidance of such big emotions.
Marie Curie's mission is to close the gap in end-of-life care. We're here for anyone with an illness they're likely to die from, and those close to them. Whatever the illness, wherever you are, we're with you to the end. Find out more at mariecurie.org.uk.
I love the agreement on a place, but also a physical thing. I'm so pleased you've got that blanket, Tom.
I couldn't recommend it more to anyone. Like, very rarely do I ever get it out, but it's just the knowledge it's there. It's like, that's my part of mum. She's still with me. Yeah, it's the feeling these things leave you with. And that's something I'll say as well, I think, a little bit. Like what you're saying about making people feel better actually is actually impossible. I think no one else can do that for you. And I think that happens at your own pace. I think if I know from doing this with my fiance and trying to fix it for her, like, no one's gonna, there's just a pushback. If I try and tell her to see it a different way, that's never ever gonna work. And now I'm sort of beginning to see the positives about it, and how, COVID in 2020 and being in lockdown was actually a really beneficial thing for spending time as a family, and how my job led me to be close, and some of the time we spent together, and the feeling that mum left me with. All of those things are actually, like, I'm managing to take the positives from it, but that happens at someone's own pace. And I think everyone, if you want to move on in a positive way with your life, has to do that, but no one else can do that for you, and no one else can tell you. Because if someone told me, no, just, everyone loses their mum, and, it just happens, and you won the Olympics, and, all, like, it's fine, like, your life's good. And I would have told them, like, F off this, like, this is not my lived experience, but I can take some of the positives and move forward once I've had time to digest them, and in that way, if that makes sense.
It makes total sense. And I think it's another, important message, isn't it? To take the lead from the person themselves who's experienced the loss. That's the starting place. Just on bereavement, and you're living and breathing it now, and is there anything that's been of help to you over the last 12 months, say, that's helped you in your grief, or is helping you in your grief?
Confronting it, I'd say. I think in my extended family, and other people I've seen, I think, especially in the immediate aftermath, I'd find myself getting frustrated, annoyed, and many other things. I'd have a session either with other people or with like a grief counselor, where I was able to sort of get things off my chest, and work through things, and actually work out what was going on with my grief. And then suddenly, actually, all those things would fade away a little bit. So I think it manifests in a number of ways in your life, and can do. But I think, as difficult as it is, it's far more prolonged and much more difficult in other ways to not look at, like, to not look at it, to not acknowledge those feelings and sit with them. Because the longer you try and avoid them, I think the more they come out in many other aspects of your life and start affecting relationships and work and sleep, or any of the above. So I say that the one thing is find those spaces you can talk about it, and those places, those things, those photos, those moments, the songs. And like I have a playlist for this that I'd put on when I walk to the tree. I think whatever it works for you, but you have to find a way to engage with those emotions, because otherwise they'll start to come out in different ways. And I think that'll be different for different people and different rates. But I think it's universally true that doesn't matter how difficult it is, it's a benefit to engage with that from time to time, because it's going to be there. There's no avoiding that. You can just avoid whether you face it and process it and acknowledge those feelings, and then they sort of start to simmer and brighten, and you start to see the sweet memories. Or you can avoid it and have this sort of the anger and the resentment and the bitterness to others who have the things you don't, and all of those negative emotions that can come from resentment that can build up to others who have parents, or all of those things. So I just think find a way little and often to engage with it. Anyone going through it, I'd highly recommend Shrinking, the Apple TV series, which is about a therapist. One of the things from that, the 15 minutes a day, it shouldn't consume your life, but if you actually sit with the feeling for 15 minutes a day, then get on with your life, you're probably going to enjoy the other 23 hours and 45 minutes a lot more than trying to avoid thinking about it and going through every day with it just popping up when you don't want it to. It's not that simple, but as a principle, I think it works quite well.
Yeah, I think as a principle, it's kind of give it some time, whether that's each day, each week, because kind of burying stuff and suppressing it and just kind of hoping it's going to go away, we know often isn't that effective. And so I think as you're describing, to sort of talk about it, face it if you can and when you can, because sometimes you just can't. And the only way you can get through the not even day, but next hour is by having to just stick it in a box and put a lid on it, because you've got to go to the supermarket and get some shopping, But I think that's really important. What I wanted to ask was, you talked about feelings, and I wonder whether you mentioned a couple as well. You mentioned anger and resentment, and you used the word negative and said some of those negative feelings that come up. But I wondered whether you could say just a bit about some of the feelings you've experienced or you're experiencing in grief.
I mean, you can talk about the 5 stereotypical ones, but I mean, I think mine has predominantly not been based around anger. There's a little bit of that lately as well, which comes at random different times. But yeah, I mean, I've seen it. I think anger is very natural, and I wouldn't say all those negative things are very natural. I mean, if you don't, you're probably going to be angry, definitely angry at some point. Feel a little bit of resentment for when I saw a friend over the summer and had lunch with his family, and his grandparents were all there, and his mum was there looking half her age. And that's not that it's just that you want that for you. It's not a judgment on any of them. You're just jealous. And I'd love to have all 4 of my grandparents and my parents and share the summer as an example, but the wedding, I'm planning the engagement, all of it with them. So all these feelings come up at random different points, especially when you sort of see what others have and you don't. In that sort of example, or anger towards the person. Could a mum have taken better care of herself? There's always, I mean, you can always say that about someone that'll bile up from time to time. I think those are universally true. So I think those emotions are natural. When I say negative, I mean, or not experience them as much, rather than. But I think them coming up is completely natural, and so give yourself a break. And that's something you touched on as well, which, from my personal experience, I'd like to add to, is the sort of acceptance as well, that you going through wherever you are in relation to the person who's dying or died will be a lesser version of yourself for a while. I went into the team in the professional and the rowing example, like pulling PBs across personal bests across all of my metrics and tests, and I didn't touch any of those for 3 years after a diagnosis. I couldn't get close. And there are probably other examples, but I think a lot of other reasons, but I think a large part of that was the weight that I had on me. And my fiance, when she had the diagnosis, so she got back pain for the first time in a while. She hasn't had acne in ages, and her skin just went crazy, and your body takes a toll. So you have to give yourself the space for that. Otherwise, you're going to probably make the whole situation worse by expecting to do exactly what you've just done for years while having this extra pressure on you. I think that will catch up with you very quickly. So give yourself space to have an extra hour's sleep if you can, and whatever it is, the things that you need to do to take care of yourself, I think is actually really important. And you will not be the same version of yourself, and that is normal. And that's because you have a love for the person, and that losing them does take its toll. So I think if I could have told myself that a few years ago, I might have saved myself a bit of grief grief, probably the wrong word, saved myself a bit of difficulty by driving myself to a point of exhaustion with other things, and then suddenly being in an exhausted state, all these emotions catching up with you, it can be pretty horrible. So give yourself that space to take care of yourself and look after yourself and not expect the world, because it's so difficult.
And thank you also for talking about the physical impact of grief as well on the body, because, we know that is true and something that happens, and people are often surprised by that. And I think one of the messages which you've said in that is just also, if you're grieving right now, is to make sure that you're eating regularly, you're eating well, you get a bit of exercise, you get a bit of fresh air, even if it's like 5 minutes in the garden or in the street around the block. Yeah, it can be so consuming, all consuming at times, that you forget to eat. Or you feel like you can't eat. And so, yeah, looking after the physical self as well as the mental and psychological self is important.
I think I was quite lucky in that way because of my background as an athlete. Like, these are the things you just do. So I remember the one week, like I mentioned, in February 23, I think my dad was struggling a lot, and a lot of those things were happening for him where he was, not taking care of himself. I mean, he had to be there far more than I did and was looking after mum in a massive way. It's not a judgment, but an observation. But I'd go home and like have like a warm bath, try and like sweat, because then that'll help you sleep that night, and make sure I was eating right and drinking right, and giving myself that time where he would sort of stay up and not eat and be by our bedside. And you could see the difference in the way we were able to handle things. So whatever you can do, actually, sometimes that can be a greater support to the person. If you've got a network, take it in shifts to be that person, support mum, which is what we did, and just take care of yourself, because it does make it so much lighter. So just be ruthless on yourself with that, because I think you have to be, just force it down, or use whatever techniques you have to get some sleep. For me, that was sort of getting warm baths before you go to bed if you can, warm showers, whatever, and making sure the room's as dark as possible, and sleep supplements. Those kind of things made a massive difference to being able to get through those really difficult blocks where your mind can just spin. You can really get out of control. I'm sure you know far more about this than me, so it's not me telling you from all my personal experience, but I'm sure that there's more evidence and backs it up.
Yeah, but I think actually it's the personal experience where, certainly from the conversations we've had on this podcast, it's within the personal experience and the personal stories where the golden nuggets are, really, for people. And I've been working in sort of grief and bereavement and loss and hospice care and end-of-life care and palliative care for quite a long time. But then, of course, when my own parents died back in 2017 and 2018, it was just a completely different story. And I was just a son who'd lost his parents, and it didn't matter what knowledge and experience I had. In fact, that was totally irrelevant. And yeah, it's true. Okay, I'm going to kind of change tack a bit at this point, but just before I do, one thing I do ask, if you're happy to share, is the name of the person who's died. And I wondered if you could tell me your mum's name.
Julie Digby.
Julie Digby. Thanks, Tom. So one of the other questions we ask on the podcast, because we know that in grief and supporting and caring for somebody with a terminal illness can often make us face our own mortality. And I wondered whether you ever think about your own death.
Less so at the moment. At my age, I think I was 23 at the time, 26 now. I do have a realization that it all can be gone in a different way. And no matter how many times you say these things, the lived experience of feeling it is just so different. So I don't know, I feel like it's quite common in our day and age to have these videos about, I see them on sort of social media all the time about where, like, when the lights go out and like, what would you want? And then like, what would you do? What would you think if you had 2 minutes left? And all those videos for a second, sort of, I don't like them and the principle of them, but anyway, that's a whole other story. But you sort of have a moment of like, oh yeah, I would do things like slightly differently, and this is what I do. But actually feeling that after my mum died, it was very different. For me, it changed a lot. She was a force of nature and very driven and like work career oriented. In the last 3 years of her life, she softened a lot. She wouldn't be oversharing for me to say, and she kind of realized the centrality of people in her life to an extent she hadn't before. So she had this realization with her diagnosis, and so that's a very powerful lesson for me to learn and take by proxy. And I did in a really deep way naturally. But kind of that being said, in some ways I feel like I've lost a bit of my oomph. I had that drive and motivation to keep, achieving whatever it was that's kind of instilled in me by her, and seeing her soften in that way has made me kind of realize that maybe I faced with a choice to log off an hour early from work or make a choice to go see a friend versus, do a bit of extra research for whatever I'm working, whatever it is, my choice would probably change now. And that feels like a big part of myself that has changed. And I'm still juggling that as to what the important things are in my life, what my priorities are, and from that perspective shift from the grief. So I don't think necessarily I think so much about my own death at this age, even though I definitely do. I think that the way that seeing my own mortality and knowing that has sort of changed me is in my perspective about how I want to live my life now.
Yeah, yeah. And I think that, it's totally understandable, but I'd imagine sort of younger people, when you are younger and you lose someone so close, like a parent, then it is going to completely shift and shape some of that stuff, isn't it, for the future, as you're navigating your way through the new life, if you like, where your mum's in it in a different way and not in a physical way, and all that means, and whatever that's going to bring, but actually the new you as well. And you're kind of, as you described, you're changing priorities, and that will continue to evolve, no doubt. Can I ask, is legacy something that's important to you, as in how you'd like to be remembered?
No. Yes and no. I don't like the connotations of the word legacy in some ways at first glance. I think it kind of inspires this idea that you need to be remembered or famous, or that having more generations of people knowing your name is like a positive thing. So by legacy, I don't know what I use if because that word has those connotations to me at least. But I feel like, there's a slight tangent, but there's a quote like the function of leaders is to produce more leaders, not more followers, or you're not a leader until you've produced a leader who's produced a leader who's produced like whatever you want to say. I feel like my legacy, even though it's not going to have a name to it, I would love it to be that I live up to a set of values that people are inspired to take on through my interaction with them in my life, and that perforates a wider group of people. That is how I see it. I don't think it will have my name to it, and those who know me will for a generation or two, but I'm not expecting my name to be remembered, but I hope that I can conduct myself through life in a way that a standard that inspires others to do the same and live up to a set of values that does have a legacy, but it's not necessarily one that is attached to me. It's attached to a way of being and a set of values. So that's how I've interpreted that after all of this. Because yes, to me it's my mum, but it wasn't just that. It was living up to a set of values, which is the driving motivation for seeing through the Olympic campaign in the preceding 7 months after her death was like horrible, and I had to have a why to do that. And so to me, it was just that, living up to a set of values that she'd be proud of, that I'm proud of, and that I'd be proud to instill in other people. So that's the way I interpret the word legacy.
Yeah. And I really like that. It's brilliant. And I was thinking about leaving a mark, but without your name on it. Leaving a mark, and the mark is that others leave a mark, and their mark is that they help others leave a mark, and so on.
Exactly. You're just a part of
great.
something. That's part of something much bigger. Because I don't think putting yourself at the center of it, it doesn't resonate with me in the same way. And I think anyone can intuitively see why that feels like a really nice thing to be a part of. And that's the lesson Mum left me, and the value, and at least I take from it, the value in life is in the connection with others. There is no value without it. So you could be that name that's remembered forever, who, cast aside all the friendships to get to the top of whatever field that she's remembered for 10 generations, 20 generations, or whatever it is. But, I'm not going to find value in that, I'll be gone. But many others could find value in the inspiration of the standards. I'm not necessarily articulating it as well now, but I think you understand what I'm saying.
Yeah, totally do. And my last question is, how has it been today having this conversation and being on the Marie Curie couch?
It's been great. They're difficult conversations to have publicly. And I guess the other thing I'll say is as well, I like doing this because it challenges a trope. I'm a 6'6" man who's won the Olympics, and I'm sat here at home, working from home, crying publicly. And, that's the emotions that we all deal with. And men are especially afraid to have these conversations, not necessarily just about grief, but in general, the ones about the emotions that are there. And I'd like to leave the message that at least, for anyone, but for men in particular, that having these conversations, I think it shows a sign of strength to be able to be vulnerable and share these lessons. I think it's actually incredibly powerful. So, I mean, that's kind of another, exactly like I say, with leaving values, that's one of the things I would like to if one person takes that from this, that's a massive win. You can have these conversations in public, and you should wear your emotions like this as a badge of pride. It doesn't mean you have to show them to everyone, but in the right circumstances, in the right settings, with the right people. Being vulnerable, being open, and having these conversations can be very healing for all involved. So I would recommend it.
I couldn't agree more. And Tom Digby, thank you for joining me today on the Marie Curie couch. Thank you for sharing some of your mum, Julie Digby's story. And it's been an absolute joy to meet you.
And you, Jason. Keep up the amazing work. It's awesome. Thank you for having me on.
So that's all for this episode of On the Marie Curie Couch. We hope it's got you thinking about matters of life and death, and perhaps starting those conversations with your own friends and family. Marie Curie's here to help. From planning ahead to coping with bereavement, you can talk through any concerns you have around the end of life with our support line team, which also includes specially trained nurses. Call us on 0800 090 2309 or search Marie Curie online. This podcast is produced and edited by Marie Curie with support from Ultimate Content. The music featured is Time Lapse by Pan-Oceanic. If you've enjoyed this podcast, please do like and subscribe. Thanks for listening. Until next time, goodbye.